Hello and welcome back to the ArtVid19 channel, where I show you simple and easy ways to make art. Hopefully you'll be less bored in isolation and gain something out of it that you can be proud of. Now, I know I haven't uploaded a video in a while because of, starting college, all this tier 4, lockdown, not lockdown, Christmas business, but it's now the Christmas holiday, so I'm just taking a break to I had some inspiration whilst being at college to film a new video for you guys, so here I am. I'm actually in tier 4 right now, which means we basically can't do anything, and I feel so bad for everyone in tier 4 right now, so sending love to all my tier 4 peeps. If you have to spend Christmas alone, I feel bad for you. Hopefully these artists that I'm going to show you today will give some light to you and give a little bit of happiness. In today's video, it's going to be 7 artists you should know. And whilst I'm going to be telling you about those, I'm going to be doing some calligraphy with these key-thrown pens or markers that I got a few months ago, just for some visual stimulus, because I didn't want to just make this all talk, no visual. And this is the journal I'm going to be doing it in. It's a, Lecturum 1917 journal that I actually got ages ago, and clearly I started off ambitiously, but then it sort of went downhill after a bit. This is like a year ago I made this. A lot of slam poetry in there. I like this one with hands. 7 artists that sort of don't get as much appreciation as they should. That kind of blew my mind when I looked at their work and understood their stories, so I hope you can share that with me. And if you enjoy the video, please give it a like so I can get some validation in my life. Anyway, right. So the first artist that we're going to talk about is Ronmuir. He's actually got German parents, but he was born in Australia. And his parents were German toy makers. So he basically is a sculptor, and he grew up making these toys with his parents, and then as an adult, he became a puppeteer and puppet maker for pretty cool background, to be honest. And then he thought, you know what? He had this background in creating emotive characters out of materials, and then he began making them in human form. So now his sculptures are very hyper-realistic, sort of meaningful, but very extremely immaculately detailed, hyper-realistic sculptures. And the interesting thing about them, not just how uncannily realistic they are, but actually their scale is his sort of trademark. So he changes the scale of his sculptures. The scale changes, so there's a sculpture that he did called Ghost, and by the way, he's contemporary artist, so he's been working from the 90s till now. And Ghost is the one that really drew me first. It's this huge 7-foot sculpture of this young girl in a swimsuit. She's hunched against the wall and is really sort of scared, almost very charming in a way, but she's so big. He does a very varied range of work, but I really like Ghost, that's probably my favourite. But he also does Mask, and all of his great sculptures, they're all immaculately detailed, and he actually drills holes into his sculptures, which are made out of resin and fiberglass. He drills holes and then places individual hairs in there, and that's just one of the things that make them so realistic, along with their slightly translucent skin, because if you actually look at human skin, it's not just one block colour. You can see the veins, it's just layers upon layers, and that's what he does with his skin to make it so realistic. A lot of people do criticise his work, they're either huge sculptures or really small, depending on what the intended meaning is. But people often say oh, his work's just one of those weird giant things that you get, he's just an act, they're not proper art. But I think they are. I think art, one of the themes of today's video is that art isn't just one thing, It is so much more than just paintings and little sculptures and sort of casts. But yeah, he doesn't use casts, by the way. Ronmuir sometimes he uses models, but he uses photo references of people and then takes drawings of that. Then he takes clay models up bigger scale or smaller and smaller, and he then builds on that clay model to create fiberglass supports, resins, blah blah blah, to a bigger thing or a smaller thing. But basically it's really meaningful, and it dodges the uncanny valley because it has a lot of emotion. It sort of tells a story within each work, and you can sort of see yourself within the work. And their dad really invited you to sort of look in and really be curious about mortality and life and humanity itself. Okay, and the number 2 artist was Osamu Noguchi. He was actually around in about sort of the 1900s, so he died in about 1977 or something, I think. That's probably wrong, but yeah, he worked primarily from like the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s and 70s. And you may actually know him. He's half Japanese, half American. You might know him for his modernist, very forward-leaning and ahead of his time furniture design. So he was like a sort of architect slash designer slash sculptor. But I actually really like his sculptures that he did based around race, and I think they're really interesting. And the first sculpture was Death, and this sculpture is made up of cast iron and has wood and rope, and it's this really mangled, distorted, twisted, pulled, bent brown body. Noguchi made it in around the 1930s, and I think he was a really big advocate for, you know, different races' rights, and because of all the segregation and stuff going on in America at the time, he was sort of in that world being mixed race. And yeah, I think Death is a really great sculpture, and it was really ahead of its time. I don't think there was anything like it back in the 1930s. That was so powerful and emotional. It had such a big statement. And another sculpture he did was Mirror, and this was based on looking at yourself and just looking at yourself as pure bones. Like the bone, he deconstructed the shapes of the bones of the human body in this like white, sort of two flat sculpture, not 2D but like flat, and sort of harsh. And he made you think about how inside we're all just the same, we're all just bones. But obviously, as I was doing all these earlier before the camera cut out, I was using my pens here to do some harmonic colour blending here. So I just did a light base, then I did the middle colour and the dark colour on the bottom, swishing them all throughout. Ooh. It did take me quite a while to get used to these pens because they are quite flaky, but they're okay once you get used to it. And they do have this fine tipped end and a brush tipped end, which is actually really good, and there's a really wide range of colours, so I would recommend them for calligraphy and stuff. Yeah, so that's Osamu Noguchi. Check out his work. He was very influential and a real modernist at heart. Okay, so number 3 is Georgia O'Keeffe. She was an American painter who really paved the way, basically, for female abstraction in art. She was one of the most well-known female painters of the time, in around the 1920s, through the century, I think, and she got more abstract as her life goes on. I think you'll see that in a lot of historical artists, that, you know, abstraction and sort of deviating from just purely copying life became much more acceptable as the years went on. Yeah, she was really the first person to sort of try this technique where all of her landscape art just had no texture. She just did away with texture and just created her own. She had these nice folds, and really in a black place she just illustrated these rocks with really smooth textures. A lot of them are really smooth, and like created an atmosphere and created a feeling more than just copying life. Like it wasn't really something that was done then to just paint something as you feel it, less like as you see it. So her work is really interesting, just with that sort of devoid of real life texture, but a sort of emotional texture. And she'd done this great painting when she was in a plane, like looking at all the clouds, and it wasn't true to life, but it did capture the serenity of it. And I think a lot of her paintings did that, using like harmonious colour and those smooth and sort of calming textures. And a lot of her work was based on like New Mexico, Arizona, and like the South America, like all the deserts and that. I think she was really inspired by. So the fourth artist is Matthew Albanese. He's this American model maker. He makes these really detailed landscape models made out of inanimate objects. He even uses bin bags for one, and he uses different things like household objects, even bits of moss that he's found from outside, to create these really immersive worlds. And they're so realistic you'd literally think they were a photo until you realise the meaning behind them. Like wildfire, it sort of reminds me of like man's consumerism and how that's contributed to global warming and the climate and the problems with wildfires and all that. And there's one he did about the coral reef, where he recreated the coral reef using tons of like household plastics. And to me that sort of just symbolises our overuse of plastics and like that aren't degradable, so it ruins the oceans and plant life, and it's just like sort of ironic in that way that we're not appreciating the sea. We put more value on our own. He even made a model of an ice cap using sugar, and this was called Icebreakers, and he made like these really realistic ice caps just using like hardened sugar and like melted sugar and like little granules, and it looks like proper snow and ice. And he worked on that for months, and to me that is just really meaningful. I don't know like if anyone else feels like this, but just the way sugar like just contributes to society, and how like the obesity of us, like the obesity is just impacting climate change, and these ice caps melting. Like, sugar symbolises that for a lot of things. I think he started making the Small Worlds project in about 2009, 2010, so go check him out, I love his work. Okay, so at number 5 we have Agnes de Mille. You see I kind of messed up on this one, but you don't have to see me messing up now because the camera cut out. But yeah, she is a contemporary artist. She is one of my favourite artists. She's definitely a true modern master of watercolour. Her watercolour is amazing. She's not afraid to take risks. She uses layers and different techniques and splatters, and she's also a master of acrylic. She's also a master of oil, and she does these great oil paintings as well as watercolour. She does great murals, and they're often nature inspired and they all have sort of deep stories to me, and a lot of them are female based, but I really like her Ghost Following Me painting. It's just this plain white sky with these rolling hills and like a woman with a ghost, like sort of trail of ghost paint following her, but I think it's quite sort of meaningful, and I really like the way each painting tells a story. And yeah, she's just a master. She's a modern master. She's Van Gogh of watercolour of the modern day. Yeah, she's just really good. That's all I can say about it, really. Okay, we're almost getting there. At number 6 is John Heartfield. That's not actually his real name because he was German, and he lived during World War I and II in Germany, and a lot of he basically introduced collage to the modern world. He was basically the father of monogram, and he used a very normal everyday technique of just cutting stuff out of magazines, all the Nazi propaganda and stuff that was flowing around Berlin at the time, and then he mashed it all together with glue with other pictures to create these very striking communist propaganda posters and illustrations that were used in like Communist magazine, Communist Party posters all around Berlin. And he was very brave in doing that, and I really admire him and how he used his art to create a statement and even went against the Nazis. Yeah, his work, especially Kaiser Hitler and Hitler the Superman, are just like very iconic. Like, even though he's still quite iconic, he is iconic to that period of like anti-Nazi propaganda. He also did a lot of book covers. But he's basically, the father of monogram, and like without him we wouldn't have like modern collage. Okay, at number 7 we have Gwen John. This one's going a bit better. I'm going to keep doodling on this because I can, and you know, and this isn't going to be very visually exciting now, the camera cut out, but yeah. So Gwen John was a Welsh woman who actually lived in France, but she was actually sadly overshadowed a bit in the industry by her brother and her lover, both being famous artists. So she was quite solitary. She lived in this like apartment alone in Paris, but what she did was paint these extremely sort of subtly emotional paintings of like women she knew and just people from around like the sort of working class areas of Paris in a sort of regal way. And I really like, especially her self-portrait she did, it's full of character about her, and you can sort of see her in the painting. But I just think the way she drew such, you know, normal people like doing normal things in a regal way, and like a very, look at these, you know, these people they have grace, they have beauty, and you know, I think that was really interesting for the time. Like obviously that wasn't very normal at the time, like, you know, they're just working class, they weren't very valued in society. But yeah, I bet you thought that was the end of the video, but it isn't. We've actually got a bonus 8th artist who is a modern artist right now. He's Belgian, he's pushing the boundaries, he's slightly controversial. It's Wim Delvoy. This guy is just, I came across him in an article a few days ago. He is absolutely the definition of madness. His work is chaotic, it's varied, it's eclectic. He engraved tyres, he hammers text messages into the sides of rock faces and mountains. He tattoos pigs, like these weirdly meta taxidermy stuffed pigs with tattoos on are just sitting in museums just looking like such thugs. It looks simultaneously cute and disturbing. Like that's the thing that you get out of these, and that's what he wanted you to feel. And he has some really weird but interesting designs like Louis Vuitton things and Disney things and like cool tattoos that like a traditional biker would have. And yeah, they're just really meta. Like if you look at these pigs, they're just, what? And he also does ones where he covers them in cloth. But he wants you to think that. He wants to push the boundaries, and I think there's no one else like doing that stuff today. Like a lot of things he does now, a lot of things he also does is like very gothic and like twisting gothic architecture, literally, and engraving tiles, like I said. And like he even made, this is the maddest thing, he even made this machine, I can't remember what it's called now for the life of me, but he actually made this machine based on the digestive system of the human body, where you input food and then this whole machine turns it, and it turns it into actual feces, which he then used for the windows of stained glass windows of a Gothic church. Like what? Like you think this is something I made up, but it's actually real. And this guy is just out of this world crazy. And I think, going back to the pigs, I think that like the way he puts like all logos and brand stuff on the pigs really sort of, it reminds me of Animal Farm, you know, by Wells, I can't remember his name. It reminds me of Animal Farm and the way, you know, we're sort of looking at animals with that stuff on. Is that really what we are? Like, we're like that. Like, what do animals see when we dress ourselves up in these weird foreign languages with like tattoos? Like, is it weird? It's questioning what tattoos are and what, you know, what we're doing to ourselves as primarily animals. And you know, it's just really interesting, and there's a lot of meaning you can get out of it. He also engraves tyres, and when he chips away, this was like in the 90s, he chipped away with hammers at like the side of big rock faces, text messages. So there's one called Lasagna. They're really like these weird personal, like insignificant life moment text messages, but they're like, putting it on a rock face like that is really interesting, and I think it's like nothing that I've ever seen before in my life. So please check out his work. It's very thought-provoking. Yeah, I hope you liked that list, guys. I'm just going to go through them again. We've had Ronmuir, the hyper-realistic sculpture with beautiful detail and beautiful emotion that will blow you away. And then Osamu Noguchi with the great race sculptures. Then Georgia O'Keefe with the abstract landscapes. Matthew Albanese with the small world models. Agnes Cecile with the beautiful watercolour and just inspiring stories within her work and the storytelling within it. John Heartfield, the father of the monogram, absolute brave artist. Gwen John, the subtle, overshadowed 1920s female artist. And then Wim Delvoy, the bonus artist. Yeah, so thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you check these out. Hope you all staying safe. I know it's tough times out there, but we got this. Yeah, peace out. See you in the next one. Bye.